Welcome back to another technical area show. This one, the review show for week 3. A lot of stuff happening this weekend. A lot of really exciting games this weekend. A bunch decided by one goal. We got a red card in a game. We had a bunch of penalties, some upsets here and there. So there's been a lot to talk about here in this week. And I think without further ado, we should get right into the recap of that, around the Premier League in 180 seconds. So let's get right into that right now. Starting the weekend off early this time around as Everton took on Aston Villa. The Toffees controlled a lot of the possession, but that doesn't win you games. Villa scored in the 21st and the 95th to win their first Premier League game in 15 tries. On to Saturday, Chelsea traveled to Norwich City for the early game, and boy was this one exciting. 4 goals in the first half would leave it tied after 45, but it was a Tammy Abraham brace that would make the difference as Chelsea won 3-2. From north to south, Southampton traveled to Brighton for their third match. 30 minutes in, Brighton was forced down to 10 men, and that was that. 2 goals in the second half gave the Saints their first win this year. Over to Old Trafford now, where Crystal Palace took on United. The Eagles got off to a dream start as Jordan Ayew slotted home a goal in the 32nd minute, and they would hold on to that lead until just before stoppage time when Daniel James tied things up, curling one in from the top of the box. So it ended tied, right? Wrong. Crystal Palace fought back. Van Aanholt found the net 3 minutes into stoppage time, and Palace shocked United at Old Trafford for the first time in 20 years. In London, West Ham took on Watford, who desperately needed a good performance. Unfortunately for them, this wasn't their day either. A penalty in the third plus 2 quick goals by Sebastian Haller won it for West Ham 3-1. In what turned out to be an exciting match, Leicester traveled to newly promoted Sheffield United. The Foxes got off to a good start with a Jamie Vardy goal in the 38th minute, but as has been normal for Sheffield, they didn't back down. A goal in the 62nd minute by McBurney tied things up, but Leicester would have the last laugh with the goal of the season so far by Harry Barnes for the 2-1 win. The only 2 teams to not drop points this year matched up as Arsenal took on Liverpool for the final match on Saturday. Arsenal held up for the first 40 minutes, but then things got bad fast. 3 goals in 20 minutes, including 2 from Salah, gave Liverpool enough for the 3-1 win and a sole spot at the top of the table. On to Sunday, where Man City traveled to Bournemouth. The Citizens jumped out to an early 2-0 lead in this one. Harry Wilson would cut the deficit in half with a beautifully placed free kick, but it wouldn't be enough as City won 3-1. Back in London, Spurs welcomed Newcastle to their new home. Spurs dominated everything in the game, everything but the scoreline. Joe Linton would get Newcastle on the board in the 27th minute, and that would be the winner as Spurs drop a shocker 1-0. Finally, Wolves took on Burnley in the last game of the weekend. Burnley took the lead early on an Ashley Barnes goal in the 13th minute and would stay that way until the 97th minute when Raul Jimenez converted a penalty to give Wolves their third draw in as many games to end the weekend. All right, well, that's your recap for week 3. A good week all around. A lot of great performances from teams. Some shockers, that's for sure. And we'll go over all of that. But really exciting weekend overall. A lot of good games going on from Friday all the way through Sunday. Just another exciting week of Premier League action as we move forward here in the season and get a little deeper and try and kind of figure out a little bit more about what these teams are all about. And with that, it'll lead into our Champions League bound segment, or who our Champions League bound teams of the week are. And I think we'll start off with a team that had a pretty bad go of things for the first 2 games, but picked it up this time around against another team who had a bad go of things. West Ham United, they played really well. I thought they, obviously the penalty in the 3rd minute there helped them out a bit, but still only allowed 1 goal in the game against the Watford team, who, granted, is pretty bad so far, or has been pretty bad so far this season. But West Ham did enough. They did a really good job of not really letting Watford get into the game. Picked up those 2 goals by Sebastian Haller to open up his account, and they took the game 3-1. So great performance by them. I think this might really help them get a win under their belt now and really jumpstart their season. to show a little bit more of what they can offer. I don't think they're as bad as they were in the first two games. They scored 3 goals here at Watford, which is a difficult thing to go on the road and do. So good job by them, and I think they deserve this Champions League bound team of the week because of their performance and because they bounced back this week after 2 tough games in a row. And found themselves with all 3 points, and now I believe 4 points on the season after the tie last week against Brighton. Moving on to our next Champions League bound team of the week, I think we got to put Liverpool on this list just because they went up against the other top team in the league. Again, granted, we don't know much about these teams. Arsenal won their first 2 games. They didn't play anybody terribly hard. Played Newcastle and Burnley, 2 teams that they should have beaten by more goals than they did. And this was their first real test. But still, Liverpool came out. This was their first real test as well. So, neither of these teams have played anybody really that great. But Liverpool came out and showed everybody why they're one of the favorites to win the Premier League. Came out, dominated the game. Arsenal held things together for 40 minutes, but couldn't do a good enough job of keeping things at bay. Salah scored 2 goals. Liverpool win it 3-1. Dominated Arsenal for the most part of the game. Arsenal never really got into it too much. And just again, showed why they're so good. Put in a good performance against a good team. And that's why Liverpool finds himself on the Champions League bound teams of the week. Next, we're going to move to Leicester, who put in another great performance. The 2 games before this, tying Wolves in their first match and then tying Chelsea in their second match. Kind of needed a win here, not desperately, but would have been good, especially against a team like Sheffield United, who was newly promoted. And things got tough here. Sheffield United has been a tough team for a lot of teams to play. They had a tie in their first match, I believe, and then the lost last match. I'm not sure exactly. I'd have to check that. But still, they put up some really good performances. And at home, it's always hard to play a newly promoted team at home. There's a lot of excitement behind them. Obviously, they had the 1 point. They had a win and a tie, I believe. So they were actually at 4 points going into this game. And Leicester, they played some pretty tough teams, and now it was time for them to show what they can do. And they got in a little bit of a bind after Vardy scored the goal, but in the 67th minute, Oliver McBurney came back and scored a goal for Sheffield United and tied things up. And that's kind of how Sheffield United's been doing it lately. Just really creating late chances and putting goals on the board in the second half and bunkering down from there. But Leicester found a goal through just a beautiful strike by Harry Barnes. Managed to get the 2-1 win. They played well enough for a 2-1 win. They beat a team that they should have beaten on the road. And I think just a good performance by them. A tough team to play in Sheffield United, who's been pretty locked down defensively. Getting 2 goals and getting all 3 points is an important one here against a team that they were given a tough time with, but still managed to bounce back and after the goal and get their second to win it all. So I think that's why Leicester has to be on this Champions League bound team of the week, because they just put in a great performance and did a good job of putting in a complete performance, getting the win, and not letting Sheffield United do what they've done to a couple other teams and score late and grab a point out of it. And then finally here, a team who did grab a point out of their match, Burnley. Burnley has been an interesting team so far this season. I think they won 3-0 against Southampton to start the season off. Then lost 2-1 against Arsenal, putting in a good performance there as well. And then they come up against the Wolves team at Wolves, who had just tied United. They had tied Leicester, 2 tough games in a row. Wolves being considered, one of those best of the rest teams, and a tough challenge for Burnley. But they went in there. They scored the goal in the 13th minute by Ashley Barnes, who's been terrific this season for them. And if it weren't for the 97th minute penalty, they would have gotten all 3 points in this one and would have ended up with 6 points out of 3 games. And 2 of those games being against really tough teams. So Burnley went to Wolves, got the point. Wolves, not in my relegation bound teams of the week, so that's why I'll talk about them here. Haven't been getting putting that final piece together to get all 3 points. Granted, they played two difficult teams, but still would have expected more out of them in this game at home against a Burnley team who they probably should beat, and a Burnley team who's definitely considered to be a lower part of the table club than Wolves is. I think I was a little disappointed by Wolves here, but really good job by Burnley to get the goal, play the defense, and only really give up the 97th minute penalty, which I'm not really counting here towards their performance. I think they did a great job, and that's on the road. And I think that's really the theme of all these teams except for Liverpool. All these teams had their wins or their draws on the road, and that's a big factor. It's hard to win games. It's hard to win points on the road. Burnley doing a good job of that against Wolves, and that's why I have them here as my final Champions League bound team of the week. So there you have it. West Ham, Leicester, Liverpool, and Burnley, all my 4 Champions League bound teams of the week. Moving forward now, and we're going to get into now the relegation bound teams of the week, or relegation worthy teams of the week, I should say. First one, and I think this one's pretty obvious considering they played at home. Well, 2 of these are pretty obvious considering they played at home against teams they easily should have beaten. Let's start with the Sunday match, Spurs versus Newcastle. Spurs got absolutely, that was an embarrassing performance by them. They should have done better. Newcastle is not as good as they're not good enough to beat Spurs at home. And granted, these 2 teams, the as we mentioned in the preview show for week 3, not a lot of goals between them, but Spurs had scored 6 of the 7 goals in their last 4 matches. Spurs should have came out with a win here. There's no doubt about that. If you're a Spurs fan, you cannot deny that you should have came out with a win here. Even after the 27th minute goal to Joe Linton, you got to expect that the team needs to, buckle up and really go after Newcastle, a team they should beat, a team that's not good enough offensively and definitely not good enough defensively to beat them. I think, we're going to notice if Christian Eriksen does move at any point this season, how important he was to their team. And I think we've already seen how important he is to Tottenham. So for their sake, if you're a Tottenham fan, you hope he doesn't move. But disappointing performance by them, and really not something you like to see from a team that's looking to get themselves up there in the title race. You can't be dropping points at home to Newcastle. Next team on here, they played on the road. Everton had a terrible performance. They did not play well. Didn't really create anything, and it was largely in the final third where they were at fault. They controlled a lot of the possession, dominated much of the game, but if you're not putting balls in the back of the net, as is the case for a lot of these teams, who are the 3 teams that are on the relegation worthy teams of the week, you're not going to win games. And that's what happened here with Everton. They passed the ball around the outside of the 18-yard box, never really tried to test anything inside to break down that Aston Villa defense. Very predictable, running through the fullbacks there for the entire game. That's been their problem for the past year and a half. Putting balls in the back of the net and creating in the final third and breaking down those teams who, especially after they score a goal, are going to, just play 10 men behind the ball for the rest of the game. Just a bad performance by Everton. Not good enough for their standards if they want to be part of that top 6 or break into that top 6 and break that ceiling that they're currently facing right now. Not what they want, not what you want. You can't be dropping points against a team who hasn't won a Premier League game in 15 tries, and against a team that hasn't really looked that great overall to start the season as a newly promoted club. So bad performance by them, and that's why that's why Everton is on the relegation-worthy teams of the week. And then finally, this one's another easy one. Man United against Crystal Palace. They did not look good no matter what they did. They did not look good. Crystal Palace came out at Old Trafford, and for the first time in 20 years got a win. For the first time in 20 years, Crystal Palace got a win at Old Trafford. Great job by them, but a terrible, terrible performance by Man United. They couldn't get really anything going. We're having trouble really all over the pitch, and really just didn't do a good job. Nothing was working for them in the midfield. We weren't really able to create too much in the final third, and then the defense let them down a couple times, especially in that 93rd minute winner. You can't be, once you get that winner, Daniel James in the 89th minute. There's only 3-4 minutes in this on the stoppage on the clock, extra time. How do you give up that goal? You can't give up that goal, especially to a team like Palace, who I don't believe even scored a goal before going into this game against Man United. Terrible job by them, giving up 2 goals, especially the 93rd minute winner. Man United has to be better at home, especially if they want to be up there and for their fans' sake, be competing for Champions League. Not a good performance by them. Going to need to figure things out because that's really unacceptable for them at Old Trafford. On the road, maybe a little bit of different story. I still probably would put them in the relegation worthy, but at Old Trafford, a place you haven't lost to the team you're playing in over 20 years, you can't do that, and that's why they land on this relegation worthy team of the week. So there you have it: Tottenham, Everton, Man United, 3 big clubs that you expect more from, dropping points, and all of them actually dropping all 3 points this week. So those are my relegation worthy teams of the week. And then finally, to finish things off here real quick, we have the game of the week: Chelsea versus Norwich. I think that was, this was an easy one. 4 goals in the first half. Great stuff all around from both teams. Tammy Abraham getting the brace and getting the win for Frank Lampard's first managerial victory as a Chelsea manager. Timu Pukki on the score sheet again. Mason Mount on the score sheet again, I believe. A really exciting game from end to end. Norwich really providing a lot of excitement here. The first few weeks have had really good performances since that first half against Liverpool. And I think this was an easy choice for game of the week: Chelsea versus Norwich. All right, there you have it, guys. That is the technical area review show for week 3. Make sure you keep an eye out for the preview show, which is coming on Friday as we gear up for week 4 here in the Premier League. Again, keep liking, following, retweeting, whatever you can do, subscribing, and get these followers up. Keep telling people about the show if you liked it. And I hope that this provides you a little bit more water cooler talk as you head into work tomorrow if there's any soccer talk that comes up. All right, guys. Talk to you on Friday. Peace.